Have you ever found yourself um, really caught in a mental loop where just one thought, maybe, about something negative possibly happening, it just amplifies itself over and over until it feels completely certain, like absolutely undeniable, despite all rational evidence pointing the other way.
Hmm.
Maybe it started super small, right? A tiny nagging worry perhaps about something at work or maybe a vague health concern.
Mm.
And then, before you know it, that single thought has just spiraled
Yeah.
into this full-blown panic about, I don't know, career ruin or the absolute worst-case medical diagnosis. That feeling where a negative thought just repeats and repeats, gains momentum, and feels like this undeniable, inevitable truth.
It's a very common experience.
Yeah, I think we've all been there, haven't we? Trapped in that kind of internal echo chamber.
Exactly.
Well, today we're actually taking a deep dive into something called the availability cascade. Now, this is a phenomenon that's usually talked about in like public discourse, where a collective belief gains traction just through sheer repetition.
Right. In the media or politics.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But we're going to turn that lens inward. Our mission today really is to explore how these internal echo chambers form right inside our own minds, how they amplify our fears, turning maybe a small worry into a really big panic.
And crucially, how to stop them.
And most importantly, how we can interrupt these loops, regain our footing and ground ourselves back in reality.
And what's truly critical to understand, I think, about this internal availability cascade is that it functions as a really powerful cognitive bias. It's not just about what you're thinking.
Okay.
It's about how the mere repetition of that thought or that idea just cycling within your own mind makes it seem more and more plausible and, crucially, more certain.
Okay. So repetition equals certainty, almost.
Essentially, yeah.
Right.
Regardless of its actual likelihood, your brain, in essence, starts to equate frequent with true.
Yeah.
And this internal repetition, well, it can very quickly lead to a perceived certainty that's just wildly disproportionate to objective reality.
Mhm.
And that often leads us down paths of, unnecessary stress, anxiety.
Like you get stuck.
You get stuck. So we want to show you how this process works, how it gets built, and maybe more importantly, how you can effectively fact-check your own catastrophic thoughts, prevent them from becoming these overwhelming certainties.
That sounds incredibly useful. And to guide us through this really intricate landscape of the mind, we've pulled together insights from a truly fascinating array of sources.
Yeah, a great mix.
We'll be drawing on some classic psychological theories like Leon Festinger's really groundbreaking work on cognitive dissonance and James Clear's incredibly practical wisdom on habit formation from Atomic Habits. That was everywhere now.
Very popular, yeah.
We'll also weave in modern studies in things like emotional intelligence and resilience, alongside some really profound philosophical and psychoanalytic perspectives. Thinkers like William James, Carl Jung, Daniel Goleman, Ernest Becker, Viktor Frankl.
Quite a list.
A real deep dive. It really is. So this deep dive should offer you a kind of shortcut, hopefully, to understanding the complex interplay of mind, emotion, and behavior that so often traps us in these internal loops and, equip you to break free. So let's unpack this.
The architecture of internal echo chambers, how thoughts gain undue certainty.
Okay, so to really get how these internal echo chambers are built, we have to start with a really foundational principle of human psychology. And that's our inherent drive for consistency.
Consistency.
Yeah. Leon Festinger's core premise in his theory of cognitive dissonance is basically that individuals instinctively strive for consistency in their beliefs, their opinions, their behaviors, everything.
We like things to line up.
We really like things to line up. And when inconsistencies pop up, when our thoughts maybe contradict our actions or even just conflict with other beliefs we hold dear, creates this really powerful psychological discomfort. It's a fundamental unease, a tension our minds are just hardwired to want to reduce.
Right. And that discomfort, that sort of internal squirming feeling you get,
Mhm.
that can very much be the initial spark, right, for an internal cascade.
Precisely.
Like imagine a single thought pops up, maybe a really uncomfortable one. I might fail this presentation or, this terrible thing will happen to someone I care about.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for someone who really values competence or success or, the safety of their family, that thought creates a direct clash, a contradiction with their desired reality or their sense of control.
Exactly.
And that powerful contradiction, that dissonance, it then pushes the mind to do something about it. Anything, really, to resolve that uneasy feeling. And sometimes, maybe weirdly, that means dwelling on the very thought that's causing the distress in the first place.
That's often how it starts. And what's frequently overlooked here, but is actually critically important, is that the magnitude of this dissonance isn't random.
Ah, okay. It varies.
It varies significantly. Festinger tells us it's heavily influenced by a couple of key things. Primarily how important the decision or the opinion is to you, and also how attractive any unchosen alternatives seem. So it's not just any inconsistent thought that throws us off course. It's the ones tied to what we value most deeply.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so a catastrophic thought about something incredibly important to your well-being, like, say, a potential health crisis, or the future of your children, that's going to generate far more dissonance than, a fleeting worry about whether you left the iron on. Though that can be stressful too.
Huh, true. But yeah, I get it. The bigger the stake, the bigger the discomfort.
Exactly. And that's the critical link, I think, to understanding why certain catastrophic thoughts feel like they hit with such crushing weight, why they seem to demand all our mental energy. They feel heavier, more significant, precisely because they threaten what we hold most dear.
So, okay, we feel this intense discomfort because a scary thought clashes with something important. What do we do about it? How do we try to reduce it?
Well, this is where it gets interesting and sometimes a bit counterintuitive. To reduce that intense discomfort, we often unconsciously resort to a really powerful mental tool, rationalization.
Ugh, okay. Making excuses, sort of.
Kind of, yeah. Festinger explains that we tend to emphasize the positives of whatever path we've chosen, or whatever belief we hold, and simultaneously minimize the negatives of the rejected alternatives.
Right, making ourselves feel better about our choices.
Exactly. But in the context of an internal cascade, this can get really tricky, almost perverse, as you said earlier. Our mind might actually start exaggerating the perceived positives of believing the catastrophic thought.
Wait, positives of believing a bad thought. How does that work?
Well, think about it. Things like, okay, at least if I expect the worst, I'll be prepared if it happens. Or, it's better to anticipate disaster so I'm not disappointed. Or, heaven forbid, surprised.
Okay. A false sense of control through pessimism.
Precisely. And at the same time, the mind subtly minimizes the real negative consequences of dwelling on that thought. The chronic stress, the anxiety, the lost peace of mind, the impact on relationships. It's a very misguided form of self-preservation. It feels like you're doing something helpful, preparing yourself, but actually ends up fueling the very cascade, the very anxiety you're desperately trying to avoid. It's what Ernest Becker might call a vital lie, a self-deception that feels necessary but is ultimately harmful.
That's quite a trap. So the discomfort leads to rationalizing the fear itself.
Which then paves the way for the next crucial element, the sheer, almost unbelievable power of repetition in cementing these thoughts.
Right, the availability part of the cascade.
Exactly. As James Clear illustrates so effectively in Atomic Habits, a fundamental principle of habit formation, drawing directly from neuropsychology, is the idea that neurons that fire together wire together.
Hebb's law.
That's the one. Hebb's law, first articulated way back by Donald Hebb in 1949. And this isn't just for physical actions like learning to ride a bike or play the piano. It's profoundly true for our thought patterns as well.
So every time we have that anxious thought,
Every single time we think a particular thought, especially one that's loaded with emotion like fear or worry, we are literally strengthening the neural connections that support that specific thought.
so it's not just a metaphorical loop we're talking about then. It's a literal, like a neural superhighway being built for our worries.
That's a great way to put it. It's incredibly powerful and, yeah, frankly, a bit unsettling when you realize the mechanism.
Does this mean we're essentially training ourselves to be anxious without even realizing it?
In a very real sense, yes. Because every time you repeat that thought, especially the emotionally charged ones, it's like sending, a little jolt of electrical and chemical energy down a specific neural pathway. The more you send that jolt, the thicker, the more efficient, the faster that connection becomes. So one thought of, say, potential failure, if it's repeated over and over, it isn't just a fleeting idea anymore.
It's carving a groove.
It is literally carving a path in your brain. It's strengthening those specific neural connections, making that thought increasingly automatic, easier to access, and eventually incredibly difficult to dislodge or replace. It transforms, almost physically, from a mere possibility into a perceived certainty, almost by brute neural force.
Wow. Okay.
And, William James, delving deep into psychology way back, he further illuminates this. He talked about how the hemispheres of our brain act in anticipation of future events. We're constantly considering distant good and ill.
Always scanning the horizon.
Always scanning. And the more a negative future is anticipated through this internal repetition, this mental rehearsal, the more real and the more imminent it feels, even if there's zero external stimuli confirming its likelihood.
So our brain is rehearsing disaster.
It's essentially rehearsing a future scenario. And the more it rehearses, the more solidified that scenario becomes in our perception of reality. And it starts coloring our present moment with its imagined dread.
And it gets even more fundamental, doesn't it, when we look at how James understood memory itself?
Absolutely. He described memory not as, some abstract filing cabinet in the ether, but as a purely physical phenomenon. He saw it as a network of paths etched into the brain's tissue.
Actual physical pathways.
Actual physical pathways. And recall, the act of remembering is then simply the functional excitement, the energy flowing along these well-worn tracks.
So an internal echo chamber, this availability cascade in our heads, it isn't just an abstract concept floating around.
Not at all. It's essentially a highly excitable, deeply ingrained, and very well-trodden memory path. Your brain literally makes it easier and faster to access that catastrophic thought simply because you've been walking that mental path so often. You've turned it into the mental equivalent of a freshly paved, easily accessible highway straight to anxiety.
Okay, that paints a really clear picture. And it's a slightly scary one.
It is powerful. And this powerful mechanism then inevitably leads us into these self-reinforcing loops where our minds actively start seeking confirmation for these now ingrained thoughts.
Right. We look for evidence that proves our fear is right.
Exactly. Cognitive dissonance theory posits that individuals aren't just driven to seek out information that aligns with their existing beliefs. That's confirmation bias. But crucially, they're also driven to actively avoid information that could introduce further dissonance, that could challenge the fear.
So we filter reality.
We filter reality. This creates a powerful, often completely unconscious, self-confirming bias. We're not just passive recipients of information floating by. We're actively, if subconsciously, curating our entire mental environment to support what we already believe, especially what we fear, which just reinforces the cascade even further.
Festinger gave some classic examples of this in the public sphere, didn't he? Like people rejecting scientific information that clashed with their existing beliefs. I think he used smoking and lung cancer attitudes.
He did, yes. That was a key example. And internally, this translates to our minds actively and often, again, unconsciously finding evidence to support that catastrophic thought.
So like a vague ache in your chest suddenly becomes undeniable proof of the worst-case heart scenario you've been worrying about.
Precisely. Or a minor setback at work instantly confirms your deepest fear that you're incompetent and bound for failure.
Yeah.
It's almost like our brain has its own internal search engine.
Yeah.
But it's been programmed through repetition and dissonance reduction to only show us results that confirm our deepest, most repeated fears. It makes finding a balanced, realistic perspective incredibly difficult because the search results are already skewed.
Wow. So it's actively working against objectivity.
It can feel that way. And these internal loops, they have significant self-evaluative consequences too. Albert Bandura, in his work on social learning and self-efficacy, he talks about how favorable judgments about ourselves lead to rewarding self-reactions. We feel good.
Right.
But unfavorable appraisals activate punishing self-responses. We beat ourselves up. Now, when we fall into believing a catastrophic thought, we might, in this strange, almost perverse way, reward ourselves with a false sense of certainty, or that feeling of being prepared for the worst. But this perceived benefit, this illusion of control, is almost always overshadowed by profound self-criticism, self-doubt, even self-contempt, which Bandura actually describes as no more devastating punishment than the ones we inflict on ourselves.
So it's a psychological trap where the tiny perceived benefit of certainty, however fleeting and negative, comes at this huge emotional cost. It diminishes our sense of worth, our agency.
Absolutely. It chips away at us.
And what's truly wild, maybe, is how much of this seems to happen beneath the surface.
Yeah.
Like outside of our conscious awareness or control.
That's a huge part of it.
Yeah.
Carl Jung observed this very powerfully. He said that our conscious intentions are continually disturbed and thwarted by unconscious intrusions whose causes are at first strange to us.
Unconscious intrusion.
Yeah. He vividly describes the psyche not as this neat, orderly thing, but as a boiling cauldron of contradictory impulses. And our sense of self, our imagined unity as individuals, is constantly being menaced by these alien powers from within.
That sounds dramatic, but it feels true sometimes, doesn't it?
It really does. This isn't just poetic language. It truly underscores the internal battleground where these cascades gain so much traction. It often leaves us feeling like our own minds are working against us, pushing these narratives that we consciously reject, but just can't seem to shake off.
Like you know it's irrational, but you feel it anyway.
Precisely. And Jung provides this powerful, almost unsettling example. He writes about a philosopher he consulted who became utterly obsessed with the idea that he had cancer.
Okay.
Despite numerous specialists confirming, with x-rays, with tests, everything, confirming that he had absolutely no cancer, the philosopher would just keep insisting, I know I have no cancer, but I still could have one.
Wow. That perfectly captures it, doesn't it?
It perfectly encapsulates how an internal echo chamber, fueled by that unconscious fear, can override all rational evidence, all external reassurances. It creates this persistent, deeply distressing thought loop that seems to be forced upon the individual by some kind of alien internal power, completely overriding their conscious, rational understanding and leading to profound, inescapable distress.
The stakes of catastrophic thinking, why these cascades are so damaging.
Okay, so we see how these things build. Dissonance, repetition, confirmation bias, unconscious forces. But why does it matter so much? Why is falling into these internal availability cascades so profoundly damaging to our well-being?
Well, one huge reason is what Daniel Goleman calls emotional hijacking.
Emotional hijacking. Okay.
Yeah. He explains that the interval between a trigger and that trigger can be an internal thought, not just an external event, and the resulting emotional eruption can be virtually instantaneous, almost zero lag time.
Like flipping a switch.
Exactly. And during such an emotional peak, our clarity, our rational thinking, it just dissolves. It leads to actions and, importantly, thoughts that seem to bewilderingly precede any kind of rational processing.
Yeah.
We react from this primal emotional place before our thinking brain even gets a chance to catch up.
Right. We've all done or said things in the heat of the moment.
And thought things too, and this is critical. Goleman notes that actions and thoughts springing directly from the emotional mind carry a particularly strong sense of certainty.
Certainty. Even if they're rational.
Especially if they're rational sometimes. It's a byproduct of a sort of streamlined, simplified, black and white way of looking at things that feels absolutely, undeniably true in that moment. And that certainty is rocket fuel for the internal cascade. It makes the catastrophic thought feel like an inescapable reality. You've likely experienced this yourself, right? Looking back later, maybe hours or days, and asking yourself, what on earth did I do that for? Or why was I thinking that? That's your rational mind finally waking up, but it's often much, much slower than the emotional one that caused the hijack.
Yeah. But if that emotional certainty is so powerful in the moment, how do we even begin to question it? It feels like you're literally fighting your own brain's deepest conviction right then and there.
That is the core of the challenge, absolutely, because it feels so incredibly real. And we see this same kind of powerful, non-narrative emotional experience echoed in Bessel van der Kolk's work on trauma.
The body keeps the score.
Exactly. He describes a patient, Marilyn, for whom panic wasn't a story, it was a physical sensation. She said it was rising up out of my chest with the feeling of thrashing. I had to use every bit of strength I had not to scream, "No, no," as I stood over the sink.
Wow. That's visceral.
It is. Her memory of the trauma wasn't an orderly narrative, not a story she could tell herself or others. Instead, it was these fragmented pieces of raw fear and panic, isolated images, sounds, overwhelming body sensations. They provided absolutely no context, only that overwhelming, crushing emotion.
And that kind of fragmented, purely fear-driven internal experience.
Yeah.
That must be incredibly fertile ground for these cascades, right?
Extremely fertile ground, because the mind desperately grasps onto these isolated, terrifying fragments and amplifies them into a future catastrophe, precisely because there's no logical context, no narrative structure to temper them or put them in perspective.
It's just raw fear feeding itself.
It is. And beyond that immediate, intense emotional impact, sustained catastrophic thinking incurs really significant physiological and psychological costs over time.
Right, it takes a toll.
It really does. Abraham Maslow's insightful work gives us a crucial perspective here. He showed that many psychosomatic reactions, things like chronic high blood pressure, tension headaches, digestive issues like gastric ulcers, they're often the byproducts of complex, ongoing psychic and somatic processes. They're not something we consciously wish for, obviously.
Our body is reacting to the mental stress.
Precisely. An internal availability cascade, with its relentless repetition of catastrophic thoughts, its constant state of alert, acts as a persistent, high-level internal stressor. This sustained activation of our internal alarm system incurs a tangible somatic price. Our bodies ultimately pay the price for the mind's relentless worry and perceived threat.
And that creates a truly vicious cycle, doesn't it? Because the stress itself probably makes it harder to think clearly and escape the loop.
Absolutely, it feeds itself. Van der Kolk's research expands on this beautifully. He explains, as we touched on, that trauma memory isn't stored as that orderly narrative with a beginning, middle, and end, which we could reflect on and maybe learn from.
Right, it's fragmented.
It's experienced as flashbacks that contain fragments of the experience, isolated images, sounds, and body sensations that initially have no context other than fear and panic. And this kind of fragmented, fear-driven internal experience is incredibly fertile ground for catastrophic cascades. The mind struggles desperately to integrate it into a coherent story, but it can't. Instead, the raw, contextless emotion just keeps re-triggering the fear, pulling us right back into the loop again and again.
Stuck in a loop of feeling without understanding.
And Van der Kolk makes another absolutely crucial point in his work. He says, as long as people are either hyper-aroused or shut down, they cannot learn from experience.
Cannot learn. Wow.
Yeah. This state, which is very often induced and then prolonged by continuous catastrophic thinking, literally prevents personal growth and adaptation. It fosters inflexibility, it contributes to a kind of mental stubbornness where you can't see other perspectives, and it can significantly contribute to states of clinical depression.
So the anxiety keeps you from getting better.
Exactly. The path to breaking free, to truly recovering, involves restoring what he calls executive functioning. That's our brain's ability to manage itself, the very ability to fact-check our thoughts, to regulate our intense emotions, to make coherent sense of our experiences, to plan, to organize. Without that executive function online, we remain profoundly trapped in the echo chamber.
And part of what keeps us trapped, maybe this pervasive illusion, is tied into our deep, fundamental human need for control, isn't it?
That's a huge piece of the puzzle. Ernest Becker, in his profound work, talks about how a child almost has to learn to abandon ecstasy, to do without awe, and to naturalize, or perhaps more accurately, to falsify their world by building up psychological defenses against the overwhelming awareness of vulnerability and despair.
Falsify their world.
Yeah, create a more manageable, less terrifying version of reality. And catastrophic thinking, viewed through this lens, can be seen as a deeply misguided, paradoxical attempt to create a sense of control over an existence that feels overwhelming and unpredictable.
How is thinking the worst controlling anything?
Well, it's the illusion of control. It's a kind of necessary and basic dishonesty about oneself, as Becker puts it, a vital lie. We convince ourselves, unconsciously mostly, that by anticipating the absolute worst-case scenario, by mentally pre-experiencing it, we're somehow in charge. We won't be caught off guard.
Right. At least I saw it coming.
Exactly. Even if that seeing it coming plunges us into deeper, debilitating anxiety. It seems many of us prefer the certainty of dread, however awful, over the terrifying uncertainty of hope or the unknown.
That's a sobering thought. Preferring dread over hope.
It is. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, sort of how societies function, or even just how our individual minds structure themselves, Jordan Peterson's work on the tyrannical attitude reveals a similar self-defeating mechanism.
Okay, how so?
This attitude tries to maintain rigid predictability at all costs, desperately attempting to stave off chaos and the unknown. But in doing so, it ultimately dooms the society or the individual mind to stagnation and eventually collapse from within because it can't adapt.
It becomes too brittle.
Exactly. Peterson describes it as an unexpressed fear of leaving the beaten path, a desperate need to cling to what is known, what feels safe, even if it's limiting. This restricts meaning, represses novel experiences, cuts off growth. And an internal echo chamber perfectly embodies this. It's a rigid, fear-driven thought pattern that, while offering this perceived, illusory safety within its predictability, ultimately stifles personal growth and prevents us from engaging with the richness, the potential, and yes, the unpredictability of life.
Wow. And our objectivity just gets completely skewed when we're emotionally invested, doesn't it? Whether it's positive or negative emotion.
Absolutely compromised. Levine and Heller, the authors of Attached, discuss this really clearly in the context of relationships. When we're really excited about someone new, our minds tend to create this rosy picture, right?
Yeah, rose-tinted glasses.
Exactly. And anything that doesn't fit that ideal, any red flags, they just sort of fade into the background. We don't see them or we explain them away. Now, The exact same psychological mechanism applies with fear, but in reverse. We inadvertently create a catastrophic picture, and anything that doesn't fit that narrative, realistic possibilities, less dire outcomes, evidence that contradicts the fear, it just fades into oblivion. We don't register it.
We're blind to the good news, basically.
Or even just the neutral news. And Dan Ariely's fascinating work on anchoring also powerfully demonstrates this, how initial ideas, like that very first spark of catastrophic worry, can disproportionately influence all subsequent thoughts and decisions. That initial fear becomes a powerful internal anchor, fixing our perspective and shaping everything that follows, making it incredibly hard to shift our viewpoint later on, even with new information.
Interrupting the cascade practical strategies for fact-checking and reorienting.
Okay, so this is a lot. These loops are deeply ingrained, they're fueled by powerful emotions, they distort our reality. So the big question is, how do we actually break free? How do we interrupt this cascade?
It's definitely challenging, but absolutely possible. We can actually revisit Festinger's dissonance reduction techniques, but this time, apply them consciously and strategically. Remember how we reduce dissonance by changing our thoughts?
Yeah, emphasizing the positives of our choice.
Yeah.
Minimizing the negatives of the alternative.
Exactly. So we can focus on deliberately changing cognition about alternatives. For an internal cascade, this translates directly into actively, consciously challenging the catastrophic narrative that's taken root.
So not just letting the thought run wild.
No. It's about deliberately emphasizing the positives of more balanced perspectives or potential coping strategies and actively minimizing the perceived certainty or inevitability of the rejected catastrophic outcome. It means consciously questioning that feeling of certainty, interrogating the negative thought rather than simply accepting it as fact.
Okay, actively questioning it. That makes sense. It reminds me so much of Angela Duckworth's brilliant work on attribution retraining with kids.
Oh yeah, that's a great connection.
She found, didn't she, that children who were taught to interpret failure not as proof that they lacked ability,
Right, not I'm dumb.
not I'm dumb, but as a cue to try harder, as a signal for more effort, not a sign of inadequacy.
Right.
Those kids were far more persistent. They bounced back much better after hitting difficulties. And that seems like a direct, really practical method of fact-checking an internal catastrophic thought about your own capabilities. Instead of that internal script automatically running, I'm a failure, this will never work, you consciously shift it.
You retrain the attribution.
Yeah, it becomes, okay, this is a signal, I need to adjust my approach here, maybe try harder next time. It breaks that automatic negative loop.
That's a perfect example of cognitive reshaping in action. And what's truly fascinating here, I think, is how our own cognitive development plays a profound role in our ability to even do this kind of fact-checking. Jean Piaget's work on children's thinking, specifically on the whys of justification, is really relevant. He noted that young children often ask whys related to motivation. Why did he do that? Why is she sad?
Right, understanding intentions.
Exactly. But logical reasoning, the ability to ask for proof, for justification, the ability to ask, why is this true? Or what is the evidence for this? That's a much later developmental stage. It's a hallmark of more mature thinking.
Ah, okay.
So to truly fact-check our catastrophic thoughts effectively, we need to consciously bring that more mature, logical why into our internal dialogue. We need to demand proof from our own anxious minds.
It's like cross-examining our own thoughts.
Pretty much. Ask yourself,
Yeah.
okay, why is this outcome truly inevitable? What concrete evidence actually supports this catastrophic prediction? And just as importantly, what evidence contradicts it? We rarely ask that second part.
That's a great point. We focus only on the proof for the fear. And Carol Dweck's concept of a growth mindset seems like it gives us an incredible, really empowering framework for all of this, doesn't it?
Absolutely fundamental. The core belief of the growth mindset is that our talents, our abilities, even our personality traits, they aren't fixed entities carved in stone.
Right, they can be developed.
They can be developed through dedication, through effort, through learning. And this mindset empowers you to view challenging internal thoughts. Those, I'm just an anxious person, or I'll never overcome this. Thoughts not as fixed realities, but as areas where your mental muscles can actually be developed and strengthened.
So it's changeable.
It's changeable. And Dweck even suggests, quite helpfully I think, that the first step is often to embrace your fixed mindset. Acknowledge that initial, rigid, fearful thought without judgment. See it, name it.
Okay. Don't fight it initially.
Don't necessarily fight it, just acknowledge it. Okay, there's that thought again.
Yeah.
And then begin the journey of reshaping it, armed with the knowledge, the belief that your capacity for change, for growth is real.
That feels much more manageable than trying to just instantly banish the thought.
It does. And Lev Vygotsky's profound insights on language and thought, they also offer a really valuable tool for this cognitive reshaping process.
Vygotsky, how does he fit in?
He emphasized that word sense depends on context. And crucially, that meaning changes its sense in different contexts.
Okay.
So think about a catastrophic thought like the label, I'm a failure or I'm not good enough. Those words can feel absolute, crushing, definitive.
Yeah, they feel like facts.
They feel like facts. But Vygotsky reminds us that their meaning isn't static. It's not fixed forever. That thought, that label, can be recontextualized. Its fundamental sense, its emotional weight, can be shifted when we consciously apply new information, different perspectives, alternative interpretations. It's about not letting that single word or phrase hold a monolithic, universally negative meaning, but understanding how its significance can be altered, softened, perhaps even neutralized by deliberately reframing it and bringing in new evidence or context.
So failure in this one instance doesn't have to mean failure as a person forever.
Precisely. It's about limiting the scope and changing the context of the meaning.
Okay, so we're working on reshaping the internal narrative, questioning the thoughts, changing the meaning. How do we then build new mental habits to replace the old automatic negative ones? Because those pathways are strong, as you said.
They are strong. And this is where James Clear's Atomic Habits comes back in, particularly his emphasis on repetition, not perfection.
Right, just get the reps in.
Just get the reps in. You don't need to perfectly vanquish the negative thought every single time right away. You just need to consistently practice the new response. Get your repetitions in for the healthier thought pattern or action. And crucially, we need to apply his fourth law. Make it satisfying.
Make the new habit satisfying. How do we do that with thoughts?
Well, to interrupt a negative thought loop effectively, we need to repeatedly practice a new, more positive or neutral thought, or maybe a specific action, and then find some way to make that new behavior immediately satisfying. It needs a little reward.
Okay, like what?
It could be incredibly simple. Maybe after you've successfully questioned a catastrophic thought and brought yourself back to the present, you take a deliberate, deep, calming breath and consciously acknowledge your mental effort. Like, good job, brain.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Or perhaps you immediately pivot to a pleasant, brief activity. Maybe listen to a favorite song for just 1 minute. Or step outside and feel the sun on your face for 30 seconds. The key is that immediate positive feedback, however small it seems. It reinforces the neural pathway for choosing the new thought or action over the old destructive loop. It makes the brain want to do it again.
Little rewards for the brain. I like it.
Exactly. And this is where direct behavioral interventions can also be incredibly powerful. B.F. Skinner, the famous behaviorist, he proposed some very practical strategies for changing behavior, things that directly apply to thoughts too, like counting to 10 when an unwanted urge or thought arises.
The classic cool down.
The classic. Or in another one, he suggested keeping busy in non-punished ways. Basically, distraction with a purpose.
Yeah.
These are conscious, active steps you take to immediately displace those unwanted thought patterns. By actively engaging in a different behavior, even something as simple as getting up and walking around the room, or focusing intensely on a physical task like washing dishes or doing a quick puzzle, you are literally redirecting your brain's fire-together, wire-together process.
You're giving the energy somewhere else to go.
You're giving your neural pathways a new, healthier direction to follow. You're breaking the momentum of the automatic negative loop and preventing it from gaining further traction in that moment.
And sometimes, maybe surprisingly, the antidote can be found in something bigger, like purpose or meaning. I was struck by what you mentioned from Freud.
Yes, Sigmund Freud, often associated primarily with internal conflicts and neuroses, also had insights here. He suggested that work binds the individual so firmly to reality.
Work as an anchor.
As an anchor, exactly. Engaging in professional activity, especially work that is freely chosen and feels meaningful to the individual, provides a secure place within the human community. And importantly, it helps redirect what he called our deepest psychological energies, our libidinal components, our narcissistic drives, aggressive urges, even erotic impulses, into a constructive, reality-grounded outlet.
So, getting out of our own heads and into the world.
Precisely. For a mind that feels adrift in these catastrophic internal narratives, this external focus, this sense of contribution and engagement with the tangible world, can be an incredibly powerful anchor. It pulls us out of that intense self-absorption and into a productive shared reality.
That makes a lot of sense. And on a different note, but maybe equally powerful, you mentioned Viktor Frankl and humor.
Ah, yes. Viktor Frankl, drawing from his profound, unimaginable experiences in the concentration camps during the Holocaust, reminds us, in man's search for meaning, that humor is another weapon of the soul in man's struggle for survival. A weapon. Deliberately injecting humor, finding the absurdity, even when facing incredibly serious or fear-driven thought patterns, can be profoundly disruptive to the negative loop.
How does that work?
It provides a vital mental break. It creates distance. It offers a temporary reframing of the situation, often bringing a much-needed sense of perspective. It can momentarily pull you out of the intense, suffocating grip of a catastrophic thought, offering a brief but potent moment of freedom, of lightness, of resilience.
Just stepping back from the seriousness for a second?
Exactly. It pierces the bubble of dread.
Okay, so we've talked about changing thoughts, changing behaviors. What about managing the underlying feeling itself, that raw emotion that fuels the cascade?
Absolutely critical. Beyond shifting our thoughts and actions, we absolutely need to learn how to recalibrate our inner alarm system itself. Daniel Goleman, again, emphasizes calming down as a core emotional intelligence skill. And it's especially critical in those high-stakes, emotionally charged situations where cascades thrive.
Learning to self-soothe.
Learning to effectively soothe our own distressed feelings, and learning to recover more quickly from what he calls emotional flooding. That feeling of being completely overwhelmed by emotion is essential. It's what allows us to regain mental clarity and prevent those catastrophic thoughts from completely taking over. And this isn't about suppressing emotion, burying it.
Yeah.
No, it's about intelligently managing our physiological and psychological response to the emotion so that our thinking brain can come back online and we can navigate the situation effectively.
Okay, managing the response, not denying the feeling.
Precisely. And this aligns perfectly with Bessel van der Kolk's concept of limbic system therapy, which is essentially about resetting our emotional brain's alarm system.
The limbic system, the primitive part.
Exactly. That primitive part of our brain, the amygdala and surrounding structures, that often overreacts to perceived threats, real or imagined. The goal is to get it back to being a quiet background presence, as he puts it, instead of constantly blaring emergency alerts when there's no real fire.
Tuning down the inner alarm.
Tuning it down. And this isn't just metaphor. It's about actively engaging in practices that help regulate our physiological arousal. Things like mindfulness meditation, focused breath work, yoga, tai chi, even rhythmic physical movement like walking or running.
Things that calm the body.
Things that calm the body, which in turn calms the emotional brain. When our bodies are physiologically calm, it becomes far, far more possible to effectively challenge catastrophic thoughts from a place of clarity rather than panic. Van der Kolk stresses that redrawing inner maps, creating a new internal landscape based on safety, trust, and confidence in the future, is achievable. The brain is remarkably plastic. It's capable of profound adaptive change throughout our entire lives.
That's incredibly hopeful. The brain can change. And this whole journey, this building of skills, it ties directly into Martin Seligman's pioneering work on resilience, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Seligman's work shifted the focus. Resilience isn't just about bouncing back or coping with adversity. It's about actively moving the entire distribution, the entire range of our reactions to adversity towards growth, towards flourishing.
So not just surviving, but thriving through challenges.
Exactly. And his concept of learned optimism is key here. It ties back to Duckworth's work, too. It's about actively learning to interpret challenges, not as permanent, pervasive, and personal failures, but as temporary setbacks, specific to the situation, and often opportunities to learn, adapt, and try harder. This provides a powerful, sustained framework for changing how we habitually respond to difficult thoughts and situations. It's about building a comprehensive mental toolkit for long-term well-being, where setbacks actually become springboards for future success and growth.
Wow. Turning adversity into advantage.
It's possible. And ultimately, maybe grounding all of this is Frankl's powerful statement from his experiences, that profound reminder that man is saved by love and in love, and that despite immense environmental pressures, despite horrific suffering, man can live and even die for his dreams and values.
That hits hard.
It does, because it underscores our fundamental human capacity for agency, for meaning-making, for finding purpose even in the darkest of times. And this provides a compelling, almost existential motivation to actively disrupt these internal echo chambers, these cascades of fear that detract from living a rich, meaningful, value-driven life. It reminds us that we possess a profound choice in how we shape our internal world and where we choose to direct our focus and our energy.
Cultivating resilience and a flexible mind.
So as we move towards wrapping up, Cultivating this kind of resilience, this ability to break free, it often seems to mean being open to some profound change, doesn't it? Maybe even embracing necessary disruption within ourselves.
That's a really insightful way to put it. Jordan Peterson uses an intriguing, almost mystical alchemical metaphor to describe this kind of deep transformation. He suggests that a large leap forward was necessarily preceded by a radical descent.
A descent, like hitting bottom.
Sort of, or at least a deep dive into chaos. He speaks of the death of the king, which in this context symbolizes the previously reigning system of order. That could be our old, rigid thought patterns, even our familiar catastrophic ones that offered that twisted, negative sense of certainty.
Okay, the old way has to die.
It has to dissolve, in a sense, and then comes the reappearance of the queen, which represents both the source of new, often unsettling threat, the unknown, the chaos, but also the source of promise, of new potential, of creativity emerging from that chaos.
So threat and promise together.
Exactly. This symbolism suggests that breaking down those old, rigid, catastrophic patterns isn't just painful, it's an essential upheaval. It's a necessary chaos that we might have to navigate to allow for new, more adaptive, more flexible possibilities to emerge in our thinking and being. It's a kind of necessary step towards renewal.
That's a powerful frame. It's not just destruction, it's clearing the ground for something new.
Precisely. And connecting this to a more cognitive perspective, Peterson explains that when a deeply ingrained classification system, or a worldview, or even just a habitual negative thought pattern fails, when it proves inadequate to deal with reality, something fascinating happens. The phenomena previously constrained in their motivational significance regain their original status. Objects of experience are renovelized.
Renovelize, what does that mean?
It means things become new again. When you successfully break free from a rigid, fear-driven, catastrophic narrative that has been filtering your perception, the world around you, and your inner experience of it, can suddenly become novel and endlessly refreshing, as he puts it.
Like seeing things clearly for the first time.
Or at least seeing them without the heavy filter of constant dread and limitation. It's like rediscovering the world and maybe yourself with fresh eyes, unburdened by the old, limiting stories. It can feel like a genuine rebirth of perception.
Wow. That's a beautiful and incredibly hopeful thought, that breaking the pattern can lead to renewal.
It really is. And it's backed up in a different way by Steven Pinker's insights into what he calls discrete combinatorial systems.
Okay, that sounds complex.
Ha! It sounds complex, but the idea is powerful. He observes that the two systems in the universe that most impress us with their sheer open-endedness, their complex design life itself, and the human mind are based on these systems. What it means is that our minds aren't just, say, blending what's already there, like mixing blue and yellow paint to get green.
Right, just combining existing things.
They can do more. They can generate entirely new ways of thinking, new combinations of ideas, new perspectives, new possibilities that perhaps never existed before in that exact form.
So we're not just stuck remixing old fears.
Not necessarily. This provides incredible hope. We are not biologically doomed to be perpetually trapped by our past thought patterns or our ingrained fears. We have the inherent biological capacity to generate something fundamentally new within our minds, to literally rewire ourselves for a different internal future.
That capacity for novelty is key. And, shifting gears slightly, social support also plays a really critical, maybe often underestimated, role in this whole process of breaking free, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely critical. We can circle back to Festinger here. He observed that social groups serve as a valuable resource for reducing cognitive dissonance because individuals often seek confirmation, validation for their beliefs from others.
Right, we want people to agree with us.
We do. Now, while this dynamic can unfortunately contribute to collective availability cascades like public panics where everyone is reinforcing the same fear, it can also be harnessed as an incredibly powerful tool for disrupting our internal ones. If you consciously choose to surround yourself with people who offer balanced perspectives, who can provide gentle reality checks, who offer genuine encouragement, and who aren't afraid to ask thoughtful, challenging questions.
People who won't just feed the fear.
Exactly. Those people can become crucial external anchors, helping you challenge your distorted cognitions and grounding you in a more realistic, less fear-driven perspective.
But that, of course, requires real, authentic connection, doesn't it? Not just superficial interaction or echo chambers online.
Absolutely essential. Levine and Heller back in Attached, they really emphasize the importance of allowing your authentic self to shine through and using effective communication to voice your feelings of needs.
Being real.
Being real. This is crucial not just in romantic relationships, obviously, but also in your relationship with yourself and with your own internal world of thoughts and feelings. It requires developing an internal clarity and an honesty that directly counteracts the self-deception and the distorted narratives inherent in catastrophic thinking. It's about being true to your deeper self, even when your inner critic or your fear is screaming the loudest, and finding the courage to articulate that deeper truth, both internally to yourself and, when appropriate, externally to trusted others.
That takes courage, being authentic when you're scared.
It really does. And expanding on that idea from attached, remember how they noted that when you're excited about someone, your objectivity gets compromised, you create that rosy picture, and contradictory information just fades away?
Yeah.
Well, the opposite is equally true with fear. We can inadvertently create that catastrophic picture, filtering out any evidence, internal or external, that doesn't fit the narrative of impending doom.
Right.
So the consistent practice, the discipline of trying to pay equal attention to all messages, internal signals, external feedback, positive signs, negative signs, fear-driven thoughts, rational assessments becomes a vital skill. It's fundamental for critical thinking and for effective reality checking. It helps us avoid building these biased internal constructions and instead work towards cultivating a more objective, balanced view of reality.
Paying equal attention. That's a great, simple principle. Okay, so ultimately, this all seems to come down to an ongoing, probably lifelong, deliberate journey of self-observation, doesn't it?
I think that's the foundation. B.F. Skinner, in his exploration of human behavior and self-control, he framed it well. He said the question isn't really whether a man can know himself, but rather what he knows when he does so.
What he knows, meaning the quality of the self-knowledge.
Exactly. This isn't a passive process of simply having thoughts float through your head. It's an active, conscious scrutiny of your own thoughts, your feelings, your habitual reactions, your internal processes. This cultivated self-awareness, this willingness to truly look inward with curiosity, maybe even kindness, but without immediate judgment, that is the fundamental basis for interrupting these internal cascades. It's how we transition from being the unconscious prisoner of our thought patterns to becoming the conscious architect of our own minds.
The architect, not the prisoner. I like that.
And William James's concept of effective consciousness adds another layer here, really deepening this understanding. He stated, quite intriguingly, that the intellectual value for us of a state of mind depends on our after-memory of it.
Our after-memory, not the experience itself.
Not just the experience itself, but our reflection on it after it has passed. By actively reflecting on our past thought patterns, not just getting caught up in them in the moment, but consciously recalling and analyzing them after the fact, we can learn. We can understand how they formed, what triggered them, what kept them going, and most importantly, how we might interrupt them more effectively in the future.
Learning from the loop after it happens.
Exactly. James argued it's not that old thoughts simply split up or disappear. Instead, he said, new thoughts supersede them, which make new judgments about the same objective world. And that, right there, isn't just an abstract philosophical idea. That is the very essence of breaking free. It's about escaping the tyranny of mindless repetition and actively shaping our internal reality with new, more conscious, more adaptive judgments.
Outro.
Wow.
Okay, we have really explored the fascinating and yet sometimes genuinely frightening world of the internal availability cascade today.
Right.
We've dug into how just a single thought, through sheer repetition and emotional charge, can gain such overwhelming, almost absolute power inside our heads, and the profound impact that can have on our emotional well-being, our psychological state, even our physical health. It's a powerful, almost insidious process sometimes, isn't it? But hopefully one that we now have better tools and a clearer understanding to actually confront.
Absolutely. But more importantly than just understanding the problem, I hope we've armed you with some powerful insights and, crucially, some concrete strategies to push back.
Yeah, but how to?
Exactly. From actively challenging your ingrained cognitions, demanding that evidence, to deliberately cultivating new, healthier habits and making them satisfying. From harnessing practical emotional regulation skills to calm the inner alarm, to seeking out authentic social support that grounds you in reality. Remember, your mind is not just a passive recipient of these cascades. As Bandura emphasized, it possesses powerful self-reactive capacities. You have the ability to exert control, to influence, to shape your own internal landscape. You have profound agency in this internal world.
That's empowering. You're not just subject to it. So maybe consider this as you move forward from our deep dive today. The world is, and it always will be, full of uncertainty. That's just the nature of things. And our minds, well, they're inherently wired to anticipate, to scan for potential threats. That's adaptive. It helps us survive. So the choice before you, before all of us, isn't really whether to feel fear or not. Fear is a natural, often unavoidable human response to the unknown. The real choice, the critical choice, is what you choose to do with that initial spark of fear when it arises.
Yeah. What happens next?
Exactly. Will you allow it to repeat, unchecked, to amplify itself, to become a self-fulfilling, self-tormenting prophecy within your own private internal echo chamber? Or will you, perhaps with newfound courage and conscious intention, choose to step out of that loop? Will you apply those whys of justification, actively demand proof from your own anxious mind, and deliberately work to ground yourself back in the reality of the present moment? Will you choose to create a new, more resilient, more flexible internal landscape? The power to transform that small initial spark of fear into a moment of mindful choice, rather than an uncontrolled descent into panic, truly does lie within you.